CJ, another podcast getting ready to go, and I'm looking forward to this one. It's May 1st, which is kind of exciting. We get a chance to look back on the month of April. There's been a lot of good. There's been some bad. I think in this pod, I want to present. You know, we always hear this saying in baseball: you can't win a division in April, but you can lose it. You can't win a playoff spot in April, but you can lose it. I think there's some pretty good examples, and I have some good numbers to get into it as well. We'll also dig deep into some of the teams around Major League Baseball and kind of another scare happening in Texas, CJ, which is a little bit alarming, but at the same time, you get this. The Texas Rangers look really good. Pitching staff has been good. Offensively, they've been good. Adolis Garcia has the biggest arms in baseball. But Jacob deGrom, another stint on the IL. Why don't we get into this for a second? Jacob deGrom, when he's on the mound, I mean, he's as dominant as ever, but it's just keeping him there. What's the overall temperature in Texas with deGrom right now?
Yeah, so a little bit concerning, obviously, with him, and because of his history. He missed some time early in spring training. I believe it was left side, and they were just being over precautious. And he had said, I've gotten off the mound a bunch of times leading into spring training. They're just going to play it safe. And I think that's probably a theme with him when anything small comes up, is how they're going to treat it, right? I mean, they give him the 5-year deal and they go deep on Jacob deGrom. And I understand a lot of people wondering about, that contract and the Rangers taking a chance. Yeah, they know they're taking a chance. When you take a 34-year-old pitcher who has some injury history, but is, as you mentioned, as good as anybody in the game, and you give him a 5-year deal for $185 million, yeah, there's going to be some times where some things are going to come up. You're just really hoping to avoid the catastrophic injury. Earlier, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, it was a start in Kansas City. He came out, he had 4 no-hit innings. His wrist was bugging him. And I think for Jacob deGrom, and kind of watching him and listening to him a little bit, is because he does have that injury history, he's very likely to also be very overcautious, just like the Rangers are going to be, right? He comes out of that game, he ended up being fine, didn't miss a start. Now he comes out of this one after throwing well against the Yankees, and they're talking about some elbow inflammation. And hopefully it's just that. And maybe it's a dose pack to calm it down, or even something as simple as an anti-inflammatory, and you see how he feels. But, nobody knows for sure. And this is why they built the depth that they did, right? They get the Jacob deGrom news, and then the next day, Nathan Eovaldi throws a complete game shutout against the New York Yankees. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty unbelievable, right? Second time, or I should say the 11th time in Rangers history in which they've shut out the New York Yankees. So, you're talking about a franchise that goes back to 1972. It doesn't happen too often. Derek Holland was the last to do it. I believe it was over 10 years ago when he threw his shutout against the New York Yankees. So that was a nice little pick-me-up, but that's the kind of depth that you put in. Now, they did lose Jake Odorizzi, who was the other piece of depth. He was kind of the 6th starter. He's out for the year, never threw a pitch for the Rangers. But Dane Dunning and Cole Reagans are 2 starters that went into the bullpen that are doing really well. So if need be, Dane Dunning can slide in and take his spot, and they'll have another reliever in the bullpen. The other part of this, though, and I tweeted about this, and people seem to get upset about my optimism. God forbid you be optimistic. Over the 15 days of this IL stint for Jacob deGrom, if it is only inflammation, he'll actually only have to miss 1 start. And that's because of the way the rotation works out. They have 2 off days, one today and then one again on Thursday, surrounding a 2-game series with the Arizona Diamondbacks. That actually gives Eovaldi and Perez, who pitched yesterday and won, an extra day of an extra day anyway. And then everybody can stay on their regular 5-day. And then on May 9th is the only day where they would need a start. So you can do an opener and have Dane Dunning be a bulk guy. You can let Dane Dunning take the start. And if he's ready, day number 16, Jacob deGrom would be his turn in the rotation. Is that a little bit overly optimistic? Probably. But I'm just laying it out there as a possibility. If this is fine, if he feels good in a couple of days, and he's back to playing catch and throwing a bullpen on the day that he would have thrown a game, or a couple of days later, he'll be ready to go. And so I think that everyone can stay calm until you get worse news. But that this is part of the Jacob deGrom story. I think everybody anticipated it to some degree, and they'll always be extra careful with him.
I mean, CJ, the Texas Rangers are 6-0 in Jacob deGrom starts this year. So, I mean, you're paying a lot of money, $35 million for deGrom. The team is 6-0 in his starts. It's already worth the money. And to your point, if it's one more start that he misses, so what? The Rangers are in a really good spot. And I think if you're a Rangers fan, I mean, you said this earlier, you kind of expected it. I think the rest of the world, when we were watching deGrom, we kind of expected some days, how many starts are you going to get from deGrom over the course of the year? I think it's okay to be cautious about it right? Like I think, I've had some players. I'll give you an example. Herman Marcus of the Colorado Rockies. He was not. I don't want to say he wasn't precautious, but he wasn't as. He was dealing with an arm issue, and then he went back out. Took a couple days off, said he felt fine, went out, and now he's running the risk that he might have to have Tommy John surgery because he wanted to pitch. And this was coming off like some general soreness in his forearm. So his body was telling him, hey, hold on. And in the case of deGrom, because he wants to pitch, because he has gone through this, I think I'm okay with him. I don't want to say Chicken Little because the sky's not falling, but I'm okay with somebody that's saying, wait, I'm not, maybe I'm not 100% because very rarely are major leaguers 100%, but I need to listen to my body. It's a long season. It's a long year. There's a lot of expectation. There's multiple years left on this contract. I think it's better to be cautious than aggressive in this case.
100%. And same thing with Corey Seager, right? He has some injury history. He has been on the IL since the 12th. The Rangers are 10-7 since he's been out. They had a little 4-game losing streak in there, but other than that, they've been playing some pretty good baseball, so they miss him as well. But that's another big piece, $325 million, year 2 of a 10-year deal that you're going to be careful with. And so, yeah, there's a line in there somewhere where, sure, there's times where we want guys to push through things. It's probably not going to be in April very often, right? I mean, that's the other part of this is the time of the year for both of these guys, where you are with the contract. I mean, Corey Seager had a legitimate injury with the hamstring, and Jacob deGrom's got some elbow inflammation, and so it makes some sense. Now, if you were in a spot like, say, it's September, and you're fighting for a postseason spot, and you're thinking, okay, we got a 28-man roster, we can give you a few days without actually having to IL you. Yeah, maybe that would be a possibility for both of these guys, but just not something you're going to do, not this early. And luckily, the Rangers have some wins and some equity, and it's nice to be in first place, but they know the Astros are coming, and that's going to be a challenge for them. And so, yeah, in the meantime, play it smart, and hopefully it's nothing significant. I think we'll probably get some more news over these next couple of days, and, basically keeping an eye on whether and when he's going to play catch again. And then you're going to go from there. And then how did that feel? But I would assume at least a couple of days where you go meds to get that inflammation down.
So, I mean, if we didn't talk about this before, we know Robbie Ray's out for the season with Seattle. Jose Urquidy just mentioned the Astros Sunday night, pulled up, came out of the game. It looked like some sort of strain. They don't know if it's a shoulder or a lat. So we'll see what the Astros end up doing. They did not win the series against the Philadelphia Phillies. Phillies look really good. And speaking of New York,
was that a World Series rematch? I wasn't sure. I couldn't.
God,
I heard that.
Yeah, I mean, like every other word that they, like any of these gas bag broadcasters, myself included, all they did was re-talk about the 2022 rematch of the World Series like it was a grudge match. The Astros didn't even care. The Astros are like, dude, we beat them. Yeah. We beat them. Who cares? Like, it's not a grudge. We don't hold no grudge. We beat you. We have a giant ring. You don't.
That's right.
And if the Phillies said it's a grudge, what's the grudge? That they beat you? There is no grudge match.
No. But listen, we get it. You try to build things up. I think for us, we maybe try to be a little bit more of realists when we build things up. But, it's TV, especially national TV. They're going to go overboard, and they're going to be extra dramatic. That is the life sometimes in our business. Speaking of dramatic, so the Yankees are 15-14. The Padres are 15-14. The Phillies are 15-14. And I think the Astros are 15-14. They're 15-13. When we think about these four teams, and these are supposed to be, top of the class, to me, it feels completely different with every organization. Phillies feel like they're going in the right direction. Padres feel like they're going in the right direction. They had a nice series against San Diego and Mexico, which, by the way, if you're going to have baseball games at 6,000 feet, you cannot have 320 down the left field line. And 7,200. I had to go look. 7,200 feet is the elevation in Mexico City. And apparently they did not give them the Coors Field humidor treatment. I don't know if you saw that tweet. I believe it was Susan Slusser. Of course you didn't. You're not on Twitter, but I think Susan Slusser mentioned it, that I guess there's a different setting for the humidor, right, that you all have in Colorado. Yeah. And so the assumption was that they would do that in Mexico because it's, a couple thousand feet higher than you are in Denver. And they did not do that. And then again, I'm like 95% sure it was Susan. If it's not, I'm sorry. But according to her in that social media post, that there were some MLB officials, or was a Giants official, unnamed, that was furious that they did not properly use the humidor at the right settings for that series.
It doesn't shock me. The Giants have been really funny with so many different things. Did you see Kapler got lost in Mexico? He went exploring the city, ended up, he went to go for coffees and tacos, and then ended up being the last person at the field that day. And of course, true to Kapler form, had a Kapler response to it. So it was kind of funny. But when I think about these organizations, CJ, like Red Sox, 15 and 14, does
better
it feel
or worse than expected for you?
Better.
Okay.
Better. Yeah. The Yankees, 15 and 14, better or worse than expected?
Worse.
Yeah.
I think. But still no Carlos Rodon, Harrison Bader, right? We talk about that. We use that phrase. I like it. Keep your head above water until you get fully healthy. Try to be competitive. And so while their lineup right now without Stanton and Judge is, not going to say it's not a difficult one to navigate. There's still big league hitters in there, but it's not a good lineup without them. It's completely different. You can avoid Rizzo. You can be careful with him, and you're not too concerned. Not to say guys can't run into one once in a while. They will. But that lineup just looks completely shriveled without Aaron Judge and Stanton.
So they're talking about if they have to put Judge on the IL, it'd be today. They just can't go too many more days with him, who's dealing with a sore hip.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is there a maximum when you have to retro by?
I think they're just at the point now with their offense and not waiting for Judge. It's making them have a short bench, and they're really at a disadvantage. So,
good point.
You can retro it to, what was it, 3 days ago, 4 days ago?
That happened game 1 or game 2?
Well, it happened on Monday last week.
Oh, but the last game he played in, when he came out after punching out twice, I believe was on Thursday.
Yeah. So you can retroactive it to Thursday, which Friday, buys you 5 more days or 6 more days. So I think that's if like the Yankees are going to do Yankee things. We continue to look at the flawed roster, and the amount of depth that they've had has been challenged. But I mean, it's kind of funny when you just go through the practice of how you're feeling about these teams at this point of the year. Mariners at 12 and 16, you're feeling bad about it. Red Sox 15 and 14, feel good. Angels 15 and 14, probably feel good about it. The Phillies at 15 and 14, you'd feel really good, especially considering the start that they had and the fact that they're missing Bryce Harper, who could come back tomorrow.
Yeah, and Ranger Suarez.
I mean,
the big one.
The Padres at 15 and 14, but you kind of knew that they were going to have to tread water until Fernando came back. So you're waiting for that. 15 and 14 for the Yankees feels like the sky is falling. It really does.
Well, listen, those markets will do that to you. And the other part of that is, of course, what the Tampa Bay Rays are doing. Because 15 and 14, while that is manageable, and I think there's still pretty good chance this is going to be a postseason team. They're 3 and 7 over their last 10, and they're tied with the Red Sox for last place, right? So a 15 and 14 record looks significantly worse. And it's not just because the Tampa Bay Rays are playing well at 23 and 6, and they've been a great story, but it's also the Orioles. And the Orioles probably are not getting the love that they deserve at 19 and 9. And then it's the Blue Jays at 18 and 10. And I like that Blue Jays roster. And it's because it's a team that's gotten off to a really good start with a good roster. I think if you're a Yankee fan, you're like, oh, crap, we cannot get much further behind here, because the teams in front of us are good. The Rays are good. The Blue Jays are good. The Baltimore Orioles are okay. They're playing better, I think. I don't know if this holds. I hope it does. We love that story with them last year, and I hope it continues. I don't know if they're a second-place team at the end of the year. It doesn't feel like it, but I tell you what, if the Yankees don't get it together, if Carlos Rodon has another setback, then they very well could find themselves out of the postseason, and a team like the Orioles takes advantage of that in that division.
Yeah,
there's plenty of reason to panic, and there's legitimate reasons, right? We tease bigger markets sometimes, especially in New York, when they over panic unnecessarily. But yeah, if you want to be frustrated with your team right now, you have a lot of reasons to be frustrated with your team right now.
Okay, so this is kind of like an assessment of April, and to that point is, you can't win a division in April, but you can't lose it. And in the case of what we've seen through this month is the teams that have played high caliber defense, again, they rank towards the top of baseball. Walk rates being up usually helps offenses. Some of the, walks, hits per innings pitched, whip, the lower the whip, the better the pitching staff. So all these numbers continue to play true. It is truly pitching and defense. And then from the offensive profile, it's the teams that are able to pop a homer. The stolen base has not really done much to win and loss records, although there are some at the top of baseball that have stolen quite a few bases. Home run differential is really important. Even with the new rules, the time of game is down. We know that 30 minutes, which is great. But that doesn't make the difference on whether a team is winning or losing because everybody's in the same environment. So like the first monthly assessment of what we've witnessed through this month is, again, pitching and defense. So if your team has good pitching and good defense, you're going to be fine. If your offense will eventually catch up if they take a walk. So like we're noticing all these trends that have been in years past, even with the new rules, they still hold true.
Yeah.
They're still holding true.
No,
which is kind of exciting.
It is kind of exciting. And I think any kind of rule adjustments that we have seen in the idea that, man, this is going to ruin the game or it's not going to make it a watchable game or this isn't the game that I love. At this point, anybody that's still complaining about it is probably lying to themselves. Like they're just going to be miserable all the time. And the fact that, things have been really competitive among teams that maybe we thought wouldn't be, for whatever that is worth. I mean, the defensive part of it that you brought up, we know that there's some teams that are struggling that probably shouldn't be, and there's a big defensive component behind that, in particular the Cardinals and the White Sox. That has been a big issue for both of those teams. We feel like the pitch clock should keep your defense more engaged. Right. So, I mean, there's just no excuses. No excuses about pitchers working slow. The shift is going to make a difference. We understand that to some degree, but that to me, that's to the point now where if you're a bad team, you're a bad team. And maybe it's, teams getting exposed. Not that you were ever relied too heavily on your defensive metrics and the alignment, right? I mean, there's a person in each organization that was their job, solely focused on getting that defensive data together and making the alignments for each hitter based on each pitcher. And there was a lot of work that went into that. There still is some, it's still done, but not to the degree because you can't shift the way that you were. And so maybe that's what's happened here too, is that we're looking at a couple of teams that were so good at that, but maybe didn't have the rangy guys they needed. Now that that's been taken away, some range is getting exposed, and those defensive numbers are not where they need to be because those batted balls are now hits instead of outs.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are so many fun things to look at. That I do love the fact that Jorge Mateo is like such a valuable player now. Mauricio Dubon, who is speed, contact. I mean, the high contact rate guys are having a ton of success right now in Major League Baseball, which is good to see. I mean, Luis Arraez is just, exit velocity can, wipe it with whatever. The guy puts the ball in play consistently all over the field. He's like a modern day Rod Carew, Tony Gwynn. And like, those are the teams I think we're going to see this cycle again. CJ, we're going to go back to versions, Kansas City Royals back in 2015, 16, where they were speed, 14, defense, 15, timely hitting, 14. I mean, those are high contact rates. I mean, all those things are going to matter with a walk. You have to have high contact with a walk. I want to get back to the White Sox for a second, just to point some things out. The White Sox yesterday on Sunday, they had a really nice come from behind victory. Rick Hahn was saying, put the pressure on me. I deserve the blame, but it goes beyond that. I mean, you're watching this team. Luis Robert on Saturday got yanked from a game, not running hard to first base. And we found out after the game, he's been dealing with a hamstring injury, but he hasn't told anybody about it. What are we doing right there?
Not being smart. I mean, there's the part of you that if you're saying, I want to play through it, look, we just talked about this. That's fine. But then you got to play through it. If you can't play through it, then you have to say something to somebody. Or you have to say, listen, my hammy's bugging me a little bit. Probably not going to bust it on a routine ground out, which is okay. Now, that wasn't a routine ground out, and it wasn't a great look, and the pitcher made a nice play. And if Luis Robert is running hard, he's probably safe. But the way that thing ended, the timing of it was so bad. It wasn't a good look, and this team is not playing well. And there's a lot of question marks surrounding this club. And you have new leadership. And when you're losing, everything is terrible and people are at their worst. And you got to do your best to keep it together. And so when something like that happens, there's just like this huge bright light on it going, are you kidding me? Like, it looks terrible. It always looks terrible. It looks a lot worse when your team is not playing well. And you and I addressed this and you brought it up last week and wondering, listen, there's some guys under contract, long-term deals. You never know how some players are going to react. Luis Roberts having a terrible year. If he's got a bad hamstring, I mean, if anything, I'd be encouraged by that because his year is going so bad. And so, yeah, you need to say something. The communication hasn't been good. And obviously, guys got to be playing a lot better as well. But to me, I can appreciate a guy wanting to play through something, but the communication's got to be better because that can't happen. That's just a terrible look.
So the reality of the White Sox season, it's over. CJ, and I'll explain why. You're 13 games below 500 May 1st. The reality is, if you go to try to play, let's say if they play 500 baseball the rest of the year, they're still 13 games below 500. They have to play just to get to 500. They have to play the rest of the year 13 games above 500. 13 games above 500 just gets you to 81 and 81. If you were to try, I mean, in reality, we're thinking 88, 89 wins gets you a postseason spot. Maybe in the Central, it's slightly different. Maybe it's 87, 88 to possibly win the division, but we're still talking about a Twins team that is 4 games over 500. And I think they're going to win 88 games. So 89 is the magic number. To get to 89 wins, that means they have to win 81 games. 81 games in the next, 143 games. So in order to do that, or 133 games, I mean, that's basically a 40 game over 500 clip.
That's crazy, man. So Fangraphs has them at 4.4% chance to make the postseason. Baseball Reference, which also does this, has them significantly lower at 0.9% to make the postseason. They continue to go down over the last month, which is basically, this month they've dropped 35%, 5.5% over the last week on the Baseball Reference side. So you're right. Outside of a miracle, and I don't think it's going to happen, quite honestly, they're not going to make it.
132 games, they have to win 81 of the 132 remaining.
That's crazy, man. That is nuts. And it's funny because that phrase that you were talking about, can't win it in April, but can lose it in April. I'm always like, I mean, unless you really are terrible, then you can lose it in April. And that's what we're seeing here. So it holds true. You have to be really bad, right? I don't think the Yankees have lost their postseason chances here in April at 15-14. They are still, a 68% chance of making the postseason, according to Fangraphs, which is wild, right? At a game above 500. Nobody believes in the Orioles, which is pretty brutal. I feel bad for them. 35% is still a good number, but they're a second place team right now. But I get it. People don't believe that they're going to hold that spot, which is fine. So
CJ, the Cardinals are 10 and 19, and they are in the same predicament where just to get to 500, they have to play 9 games above 500 for the rest of the year. I mean, could that happen? Could they have a 10-game stretch? Sure. But that just gets you to 500. You need to play, in their case, again, like we're talking 88 to 89 wins. In order to get to 88, 89 wins, you're still looking at 78 more wins of the next 130. So that's almost like White Sox pace.
Yeah. That's it's brutal, man. Their odds at least are better as far as those that break these things down, anywhere between 30 and 40% for the Cardinals to make the postseason. I guess the division situation helps. Not that the White Sox are in a deep division, because they're not. But we've gotten into them quite a bit. I have my concerns about the Cardinals as well, quite honestly. All the things that are going on there, the defense, the way that this pitching staff matches the defense after all the Gold Gloves that they had won over these last couple of years, and then just the stuff that's going on in the clubhouse. I was listening to Jensen over the weekend, and I believe it was him and Mike Farron talking about it and saying, has this ever been addressed inside the clubhouse, right, with Ollie? Wasn't a great look with Tyler O'Neill. There seems to be some continued frustration. We saw Jordan Walker go down. It was debatable. You and I dug into that. But just making sure that you have a hold of this clubhouse. Sometimes those things can get overlooked. This is when it matters most. When you're cruising along and you're making all the decisions, or even if you're just playing decent, it's not going to happen too often. Again, losing brings out the worst in people, and this is the quickest way and the time, at least as far as a heightened time in which you can lose that clubhouse, man. So hopefully they have addressed it. Hopefully he's addressed the club and making sure that there's no issues there. I'm sure there were some people that were okay with Tyler O'Neill getting benched when he did. Maybe you have mixed opinions, but that's even a worse situation, right, where you have guys all over the place. and some are for and some are against. That just can create a lot of division.
Yeah, I mean the two places that have the hot seats right now on paper, Colorado, Rockies are 9-20. You have the White Sox 8-21. Somebody's got to be on the hot seat there. Somebody has to be on the hot seat
Can't
there.
be Pedro though. Obviously, he just got that job. Grifol.
No, and then the Cardinals 10-19. 10-19. That's, I mean, they are like, again, like the Rockies are not making the postseason. The Athletics are not making the postseason just based on the records. 7-22 for the Royals. They're not making the postseason. We know that. The White Sox at 8-21. They are one game better than the Royals, are not making the postseason. They're not. Their season right now is done. Their season is done. It's over. Like it is. It's crazy. And in the case of the Cardinals, they're essentially 10 games below 500 at the start of May.
Yeah.
Someone's in the hot seat.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and I heard Jim Bowden talking about this on MLB Network Radio over the weekend, coaches sometimes take the blame. And certainly there's times where it's probably justified, but this early in the season, it's not. And if things are continuing to go ugly for a team that's poured resources into their club, like the White Sox and the Cardinals have, it may not be a manager. It may be a coach. I hate that idea. I hate it. But it's going to come up because it's hard to sit back, and depending on your owner, but it's pretty hard to sit back and watch, not even mediocrity, but just to fall short of expectations, and to see the performance and then see a guy not hustle, and then it seemed like there's some kind of confusion, whether or not he was hurt, like just the ugly things, the Tyler O'Neill thing, the Jordan Walker thing, and everything. Those kinds of things are what are going to frustrate a owner as much as the losses are, because then it feels like dysfunction. And if it feels like dysfunction, an aggressive owner is going to want to see some kind of change. But this is Ollie's second year with the Cardinals?
I saw this
Pedro
the other day.
First year.
Yeah, I mean, it can't fall on Grifol. Could have fallen Ollie, sure. Just based on how you handled Tyler O'Neill. And I will point this part out. I saw this. This was last week when the Giants and the Cardinals were playing San Francisco. Nolan was at first base, and there's a ball hitting the gap, and they send him home. So was it Stubby Clapp as their third base coach? So Stubby sends Nolan home. He goes sliding into home plate. He's barely safe, and as he's getting up, there's Paul DeJong still holding his bat, and Nolan's looking at him like, dude, why didn't you tell me where to slide?
Brutal.
And like, this is a long developing play. This isn't like a guy's at second base or it's a sacrifice fly, a guy hits the ball into the outfield, he's at third. This is a long developing play from first. And DeJong, and I'm not, I'm just pointing out these little things matter. They matter because optically they could get a player hurt. It goes to the attention to detail that's missing. Like you're ticked off.
Yeah.
I come sliding into the plate. There's a bang bang play at home, and you didn't drop your bat to go down, 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 or over here. Like that's not good.
So when we see those things, when we see pitchers not backing up bases like they're supposed to, the little things that are necessary for championship caliber ball clubs to do, and they just do them automatically. When that stuff shows up, it's a couple things. I wonder, think about the conversations you and I have had over the last decade about how the managerial role has changed. The managerial role is no longer Sparky Anderson, Whitey Herzog, right? He's no more screaming and yelling. Those days are long gone, and probably for the better. But there is also the relationship aspect. And I just always wonder, when something like that happens and you're a good relational manager, how to best handle it. Like, listen, telling a guy like Paul DeJong, who's a veteran, he's been around, this is his 7th year now in the big leagues, is it just an oversight on his part? You'd like to think so. Would you get caught watching the play? I guess. But when I watch that, I'm like, I get furious seeing it. I get furious seeing a guy not back up a base. And even if it doesn't hurt him, say he doesn't back up the base, but he doesn't back up home, but the catcher still catches the ball cleanly, but you can see the pitcher like next to him or even in fair territory. I don't know, man. I worry a little bit about the balance and if we've swung too far to the other side. And think about a guy like Bruce Bochy, right? Who's been now in year 26 of managing. He has instant respect. He doesn't have to raise his voice. You mess up in a situation like that, and he comes over and like, hey, that can't happen. We're going to win here. That can't happen. You got to be better than that. Whatever. And he probably even say it that harshly. It's likely going to be well received. But I wonder when you're dealing with younger managers, how do you best address it? Because the new manager's job, part of his job, is to build these relationships, to make sure these guys are comfortable so that they can perform.
Yeah.
But then when you fall short, man, I don't know. Like I'm old. I'm 50 years old. I like the idea of I always reacted well
You're not
to
that
getting chewed out. I grew up with a military father, was in the Navy for 20 years, and that's just how it was. And I was okay with it. And I never like walked away feeling bad about myself. Like there's no worse feeling than when you screw up and you get aired out in front of a coach or a manager or a teammate for that matter. You remember those moments and you're like, you know what? And then hopefully you're not so fully ego that you don't, you sit there and you say, you know what, I messed that up. Tell yourself, I'll never let that happen again because that's embarrassing. I just, and that stuff should be taken care of in the minor league. So I just wonder about that part, man, with managers and how they handle these things going forward and how they can talk to players when they mess up. Like, are you allowed to yell at a guy even at all? Like, hey, that can't happen, dude. Let's go. But you got to be better than that. Like, I wonder if we even get those tones anymore.
I mean, you do get interesting tones, CJ, but I mean, players, I'm not saying that they're soft. Players just have to be spoken to differently. And yeah, I mean, this one, like my immediate reaction would be to yell. Yeah. Same thing is like, what are we doing? You could get that guy hurt like that, and that would be on you.
Yeah.
That would be on you. I mean, like beyond just taking care of the little things so we can win baseball games, that's your teammate and can get hurt. And that would be on you for not doing the little thing. I mean, like that would be my frustration level because it's true. I've seen this before. So I know you wanted to talk about some college baseball.
Yeah. So I took a fun trip, man, last kind of second. I got a little bit of a break here from Rangers games and wanted to take advantage of it. My son's high school season is over. And so we decided to drive up to Knoxville, which is about a 3-hour drive for us, and catch University of Tennessee playing Mississippi State, which was pretty cool, man. Like there's some high-end talent there. There was a true freshman who was hitting third for Mississippi State, who's just an absolute beast, man.
Oh, they said the miniature bow, bow.
Yeah. Is it Blaze Jordan? Is that his? No, I forgot his name.
I watched
Hunter Jordan.
I watched the game on Friday. Yeah. And I saw him. I mean, he was,
my gosh, stud. So how about this? So I'm watching the starter for UT face him first at bat. This guy's topping out at 97 and Bo Jr. takes him deep. I mean, just an absolute bomb, man. And they say this guy's going to be supposed to be a high first round pick, slowing down a little bit. And so maybe it'll be mid, bottom first round. I don't know. But there was a couple of things that stuck out to me. And this is more from the parent side a little bit. One thing, my son looked at me and said, Dad, I think I like watching college baseball more than I like watching big league baseball. It's just, I was like, oh, crap. But I get it. Like, it's gotten a lot better. An atmosphere in a place like Knoxville is really good. But as I mentioned, that starter that we saw was throwing 97 miles an hour. The starter for Mississippi State was topping out at 88. And he could pitch. And I think there's a concern here as you chase velocity, for kids and for parents and watching it. The guy from Mississippi State pitched better, significantly. The first rounder got knocked out after 3 innings, gave up a couple of home runs. He was still touching 97, and you can see why he's, a big-time draft prospect. But here's a kid pitching at an SEC school starting on a Saturday or Friday night and making a difference. The relievers that came in, for the most part, were 88 to 91. It was a side armor who was touching 87. Not even sidearm, low 3/4. He's 23 years old because he's a graduate student with the COVID stuff, which is wild. But he was probably the most important pitcher that game. And I kept thinking, man, don't overthink this thing, man, a little bit. Sure, just learn how to pitch, let the velocity come. You and I talk about it on the hitting side. Learn how to hit, the power will come. And this is big-time college baseball. SEC that I was watching. So that stuck out to me because there was another kid who came out of the Mississippi State bullpen and was throwing 97, but he was all over the place. And so even though he's throwing 97, he's not nearly the draft prospect as the other kid, because at least the other kid was throwing strikes. But like I said, rest of the arms, I looked at that and I think, man, people get so freaked out about trying to find themselves a spot in college. But the other thing that stuck out to me, man, was I'm sitting here, I'm looking. So the kid that started for UT, this first rounder, started his career at Georgia Southern. And his first game he ever pitched in college was against Tennessee, and he pitched well. And lo and behold, next year he's pitching for Tennessee. And that's just kind of where we are with this stuff. So I went and looked, Spilly, 13 juniors. And I'm just using Tennessee, and I don't doubt this is going on all over baseball. But it just really, I was like, oh, okay, this is good to know. 13 juniors on the University of Tennessee's baseball team. 9 of them started their college career somewhere else. The other 4, 3 of them barely play. One of them is a usable reliever who's pitching 15 games this year. My point is that those were guys that the 4 that have been at Tennessee since their freshman year, by the time they got to be juniors, are almost non-factors.
Wow.
And I think there's a trend there. It's not a Tennessee thing. There's a trend there because of the transfer portal, because of JUCO, and COVID probably brought a few more JUCO players in, just because, for those 2020 graduates, it was better. You're probably better off going to junior college. But don't get too worked up, I guess, is kind of my big thing. Going through it now with my youngest and listening to other parents and worrying about what school my kid's going to go to. Go somewhere you're going to play. This kid that's going to get drafted in the first round went to Georgia Southern because he knew he was going to play, and then eventually transferred. And I know I'm not saying this happened here, but I know there's all kinds of shady stuff that goes on with the recruiting.
Oh, tons of shady stuff.
Yeah, whatnot. But there was just a couple things. It was really fun. We had a great time. It was worth it. We're going to go see Georgia and Kennesaw tomorrow and visit my daughter at UGA, which will be fun too, and kind of do that whole thing, man. But the college baseball game is alive and well. But there's a lot of different things going on there. My Mike Farron told me this. We saw 6 home runs on Friday. It's the highest home run rate in NCAA history right now.
Really?
Yeah, that's what he told me. I'll trust.
Even
him.
with the old Easton bats, the -5s.
That's what he said. Go look at SEC ERAs. There's only 2 teams that are into 3s.
Wow.
There's a lot of teams the average ERA is nearly a 5, I believe, in the SEC. And there's some teams at the bottom of teams that have team ERAs in the 6s. It's wild, man. So that's what he said, at least. But yeah, a lot of home runs, not quite the same ping from the 90s and early 2000s when it was completely out of control. But it was cool. It was a really fun experience. I encourage you, if you're within driving distance of some good college baseball, take your kids. They'll enjoy it. We had a really good time, but also don't get too worked up about what you see. I don't know how you feel about it, man, but I've wondered about the transfer stuff, transfer portal. Is there a limit of how many players you can take in? Because all these big schools are going to look different in 2 years. Don't worry about your recruiting class.
It is true. Look, college baseball is really fun. I've done some college baseball, Pac-12 stuff. I did Arizona State. I loved every second of it. But there are a lot of things behind the scenes where it makes you kind of go also makes you want to have a college coaching job because they get paid the big bucks in comparison to professional coaching.
But that's why this happens, right? I mean, isn't that why we're seeing this? As far as, the pressure on them to have the transfer guys and to make sure they have the best roster they could possibly have is because there's a lot on the line for these guys. I want to make sure I get this guy's name right so I don't mess it up. Dakota Jordan. That was the guy.
Mini Bo.
He's a beast, man. It's rare. That's a rare situation where you're going to have they had actually 2 freshmen starting. Their leadoff guy was a straight up freshman, switch hitting shortstop, and they had a freshman, Dakota Jordan, who was hitting third. That's rare. And, and they'll be there and they're probably not going anywhere. But it's like the kid from LSU. Who's the kid the big hitter from LSU?
I don't know, but I like that kid. I like the shortstop for Tennessee, Maui. Was it Maui? Yeah. He was a good looking player.
Yeah. I think Farron said he may be a first rounder as well. But if you look at the draft prospects, I forgot the guy's name, but it was a hitter who transferred to LSU. It sounds like LSU has a good chance to have the top 1 and 2 picks this year in the draft. To be wild. But anyway, it was cool. It was fun. But yeah, things have changed dramatically, and that landscape can be pretty tough to navigate, I think, for people.
Well, that will do it for us today, CJ, on our Loud Outs podcast. You and I will be on radio on MLB Network Radio Channel 89 this week, Tuesday and Thursday. We thank you for listening to our Loud Outs podcast.
SiriusXM podcasts.